The government has said it wants to do what's necessary to bring the feudal leasehold system to an end so that leasehold flats will be banned. How do they plan to do this? By a comprehensive new legal framework for Commonhold. So, what does Commonhold actually mean? And what does this mean for the 3.5 million flats in England at the moment? And the 40% of landlords who have flats as buy to let? I used to be one of them until I sold it a couple of years ago. Now, these changes are radical and they're complicated. And I say this as a solicitor. But in this video, I break it down so you can understand it. And as a bonus at the end, I give my own views on it all. And who am I? I'm Suzanne Smith, lawyer turned landlord, and I run the independentlandlord.com website and this YouTube channel to bring you reliable information to help you make decisions without all the uninformed clickbait nonsense. And you can keep up to date by subscribing to my free weekly newsletter at theindependentlandlord.com/subscribe. Right, let's get started. First of all, what is leasehold? Well, if you own a leasehold flat, you don't actually own the property or the flat. Instead, it's like a really long tenancy agreement. And the freeholder is the person who owns the land and the property built on it. And the freeholder gives the flat owner permission to live in the property for a limited amount of time. And so this might be 99 years or 125 years, and it might even be longer when the new rules come in that will increase the lease term to 990 years. But what's really important is that the length of the lease decreases year by year until it eventually runs out. And then it goes back to the freeholder, unless the leaseholder extends the lease or buys the freehold. And with flats, they would have to buy the freehold with other people, and that's called a share of the freehold. So a lease is what's called a time-limited wasting asset because its value will fall in time as the unexpired time on the lease reduces. And another problem with leases is that you don't have control because it's the freeholder who calls the shots. In return for the right to live in the flat for the certain number of years, the person who holds the lease, the leaseholder, pays ground rent and a service charge to pay for repairs and maintenance. And sometimes that ground rent might be really high and escalate in time. So the rights of the flat holder and the freeholder are set out in a lease agreement, although they can be changed by legislation. But flat owners don't have the same control over their home as a freeholder because you need to get consent from the freeholder, and they'll be acting often through their managing agents to sell the property and make certain alterations, which inevitably involves paying the freeholder a fee. But this is the system that the government wants to abolish. So, what are they wanting to replace it with? Well, it's called Commonhold. Well, what is Commonhold? Well, the government published a white paper about Commonhold on the 3rd of March, which says that Commonhold ownership is a form of freehold ownership where individual property owners each own their unit outright with no expiring term. Now, that's a lot of words. What does it actually mean? Well, with Commonhold, it enables flats in a building or a development to be owned on a freehold basis. So the owner of a Commonhold flat is the unit holder, and they own the freehold of their flat rather than a leasehold. And each flat owner owns theirs outright and has got no expiring term. And the unit holder, the owner of the flat, will also be a member of the Commonhold or Residents Association, which owns and manages the common parts of the building for all of the unit holders. So that's, the stairs and the outside of the building, the roof, etc., etc. So this is very similar to what's called strata or condominium in the USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and across Europe. And it enables flats to be owned on a freehold basis. And with Commonhold, there's no lease, and the Commonhold Association decides how to manage the property. So it's a different way of owning a flat, which apparently avoids the shortcomings of owning it, having a lease on the property. For larger blocks, the flat owners won't carry out the day-to-day management themselves, but they would appoint managers to do it for them. However, it would be the flat owners rather than an external freeholder who would control the appointment and management of those agents. So let me explain the difference between commonhold and leasehold. Commonhold ownership allows people to fully own their flat outright. And as I said, there's no expiring term and you don't have to extend a lease. And also, if you have commonhold, you don't pay ground rent and you don't have a third party freeholder. There are no leases, and instead, the rules and responsibilities of all the owners are set out in what's called a Commonhold community statement. And so this is a form of rule book which sets out how the shared areas and facilities will be maintained, managed, and funded, as well as all the obligations of all of the flat owners. So, to use the government's words, they say that it establishes a democratic system of decision making and helps prevent disputes. Lots of people have asked me, how does this differ from a share of the freehold? Because a share of the freehold gives as many of the same benefits as commonhold, but without all the complications. Well, the government's line is that a share of the freehold does provide some positive benefits for owners of flats because they can own their flats without a third party, completely separate freeholder. Although it is technically still a third party because, as I explained, it's a company that the flats owners all have a share in. But the government points out that it will still be a lease and the people who own the flat won't fully own it as they'll still be governed by leasehold legislation. Another question is, don't we have commonhold already? Well, yes, we do. And it was introduced originally by the Commonhold and Leasehold Reform Act 2002, which came into force in September 2004, over 10 years ago. But it didn't take off. In fact, there are only 20 commonhold developments across England. And the reasons for this is it wasn't very flexible and it was only really suited for small blocks and there were no incentives to change. Everybody understands leasehold with all its problems and they preferred to stay with it unless they understood that it was actually going to be worth moving on to a different system that nobody understands. So the government is planning to make commonhold more flexible and less bureaucratic. And the Law Commission did a report on it in 2020 and came up with a whole load of recommendations. And the government is planning to implement most of those regulations. And they say it's going to be a lot more flexible and easy to use. The government also intends to ban the sale of new leasehold flats once this all comes into force, making commonhold the only real form of ownership for new developments. Now, they're going to launch a consultation later this year to work out the best way to do it. So, what about existing flats if you've already got a leasehold flat? Well, the government wants to make it easier to convert an existing leasehold property to commonhold, but it doesn't look like it's going to be compulsory. And they're going to be consulting on this as well. There's a lot of consultations. So, when will the ban for new leasehold flats come into force? Well, the government wants to ban the sale of new flats on a leasehold basis so that commonhold will be the standard way to do it. And they've not given a date for this. And they've said that they want to establish a viable commonhold model as the essential first step towards a development of a ban. So we will not ban the use of leasehold until we are confident that there's a viable alternative through reformed commonhold is in place. It's a lot of words, but basically they want to make sure that commonhold works before they introduce it and make it compulsory. So I suspect that the ban's not coming into force anytime soon. So what are the next steps? The government says it will publish a draft leasehold and commonhold reform bill before the end of 2025 for pre-legislative scrutiny. Now, governments don't normally publish draft bills, but they're doing it this time to give people an opportunity to give feedback. And then once they've digested the feedback, they'll then present a new bill to Parliament, and it will go through the normal processes that we know through the House of Commons, House of Lords, etc. And so there's going to be more consultation, and they want it to come into force by the end of this Parliament. So what that means is before the next election, which is the summer of 2029. So, as I said, they're going to publish a draft by the end of this year, 2025. And I'm guessing that a final bill will be presented to Parliament by maybe sometime in 2027, at a guess. But it depends on the feedback that they get on the draft bill. But we're going to be hearing a lot more about Commonhold in the future, because when the government comes up with the final bill, they're going to start to engage with consumers directly, so that consumers become more aware of what Commonhold actually means and begin to understand what it is. Because at the moment, if you say Commonhold, I mean, even if you ask a lawyer, they're not really going to know what it means. I mean, I had to look it up. And so the average person, they're not going to know what Commonhold is either. So there's a huge communication issue that has got to be sorted here so people actually understand it. I promised my personal view. Now, I'm not a leasehold specialist and I don't have any particular inside information on this, but I have a legal training as I am a solicitor, and I understand how long things take, particularly anything relating to property. I mean, just look how slowly the Leasehold and Freehold Act 2024 has been coming into place, particularly relating to enfranchisement. It's taking a lot longer than everybody thought, and then the government is now saying that it's more complicated than they thought. And extending leases and changing the way that marriage value and all of those sorts of things complicated, they're a lot simpler than Commonhold. So Commonhold is very complicated. So it's not going to happen anytime soon. And I can't really see existing developments changing to Commonhold if they have the share of the freehold available, because it's just going to cost money. And I don't really see what the benefits are, but I may be wrong. And it will be cheaper to have a share of the freehold when the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act 2024 comes into force properly. So I bet that the ban on leasehold won't be in place by 2029, so the next election. I may be wrong, but it's incredibly complicated to do, and it will take a lot of time. So you can find out more detail in this blog post here, theindependentlandlord.com/commonhold, and sign up for my free weekly newsletter here, particularly if you're a landlord. I'm going to be doing a lot more content in this, and there's already a lot on my blog. Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions, and I'll see about recording new videos to answer them. And please give this a thumbs up if you found it useful. See you soon.